They're trying somehow to be closer to Europeans, to closer to Russians. You cannot play both sides. It somehow it feels like Erdogan is running the United States. How do you feel about that?
Well, Nima, talk about muddy waters.
Yeah.
And these muddy waters brings us again to the image of the swamp and of these muddy waters in the pool where Trump is contemplating his own image all the time, fascinated by his own image all the time. You saw what he said yesterday, right? I can do anything I want because I am the president of the United States. So he sees himself, in fact, if we want to push the metaphors up there, he's Jupiter, in fact. He is Jupiter. He strikes like lightning, even though he doesn't have an Oreshnik. In fact, it's Apollo has the Oreshnik, so Apollo can strike like lightning. But in his mind, Trump, he sees himself as Jupiter, the all-powerful king of all the gods, ruling over Olympus and ruling over everything. This brings us to the second part of the column, Nima, because I enter into realpolitik and what actually was perceived by Trump even before Alaska and then after Alaska. It looks like, in fact, it doesn't look like, we are certain by now, Witkoff did not understand what Putin told him before Alaska. Witkoff interpreted Putin agreed to some of the American ideas as basically ditching the ultimate red line, which is no NATO in Ukraine. This is what Witkoff understood. So, okay, once again, I made a joke that I qualified Witkoff as the real estate Bismarck. And of course, he's not a diplomat. He does deals. He used to do deals with real estate. It's ridiculous. So he doesn't have the finesse of a super diplomatic mind like Bismarck, like Talleyrand. Of course, forget it. So he got it wrong, or maybe it was lost in translation from Russian to English. And obviously, Trump believed what Witkoff told him. So Trump also interpreted that Putin, so now we are having concessions by the Russians. We can have peacekeepers in Ukraine, which is an euphemism for NATO troops. It can be EU troops, NATO troops, EU, NATO troops, but most of the EU members are NATO members. So in the end, it's NATO troops. And it's not an accident that immediately the headless chihuahuas in Europe start talking non-stop about a peacekeeping force. Some of them said, no, we're not going to send our soldiers. Like the Italians said, no, we're not going to send our soldiers to Ukraine. The Brits, of course, we will. The French, we will. The Germans, we will. But the whole thing was based in a misunderstanding and a lost in translation gambit by Witkoff himself. So Witkoff is responsible for this enormous kabuki now about, we're going to have a peacekeeping force in Ukraine. Everybody knows that this is the mega red line for Russia, because Russia interprets this as NATO troops in Ukraine. So this means forever war, once again. So Trump, obviously, he may have perceived that he was... the trap was set for him. So he started to try to distance himself. We're going to be in the backup. We're going to provide ISR, air cover, maybe air defense, even spy planes, which there are spy planes, American spy planes already doing the back and forth in Ukraine, in the Black Sea, etc. So this is nothing new. But obviously no American boots on the ground. So this is how he sells this to American public opinion. But Europeans, they took it seriously. So the only thing that you see all across Europe now, mainstream media, is the European peacekeeping force in Ukraine, which is, once again, it's NATO without NATO. And obviously the Russians, including Lavrov, have been saying, look, You are definitely lost in space, because we've been saying this since forever. No way, because this means NATO in Ukraine. So once again, the problem of you mentioned, if there is, if could be some sort of clarity coming from the Trump administration. It's impossible, Nima, because they deal in muddy waters, and even the president muddies the water himself, and the guys who work for him, like Witkoff, even worse. He totally muddied the waters with his incomprehension of what Putin was telling him, even before setting up Alaska. The Russians considered that Alaska was a success because Putin went there. Trump paid attention to Putin face to face. This is very, very important. Apparently, he registered one or two ideas in his narcissistic mind. But then 5 minutes later, he forgets about it. And once again, why he is so incendiary and volatile, we all know that. He can change his mind in a second. And then he even could start contemplating allowing long-range missiles to go to Kiev, provided by the Europeans, and these missiles, sooner or later, are going to start attacking civilian targets in Moscow or in St. Petersburg. And then we are in deep, deep shit, all of us. Everybody knows that. But obviously for Trump, why not? So that explains why the Russians are being 24/7, they have to be on red alert about everything. How he's going to change his mind, what's going to be the next gambit, what sort of PR operation he's going to mount. I want a meeting with Putin and Zelensky. Maybe not such a good idea, or maybe I won't go, or maybe they will go and I'll talk. You see, it's muddy waters all over the place. So this is going to be discussed at the SCO table this weekend in Tianjin, and obviously will be discussed by Putin and Xi face to face. Putin is on a 4-day visit to China. This is immensely important, including the SCO in Tianjin, and then the big parade on on October 3 in Tiananmen Square, 80 years of the Chinese victory over Nazism, fascism, and Japanese imperial aggression. Enormously important. And Putin and Xi will be together for 4 days. So obviously the strategic partnership will be even more solid after that. And they'll be discussing, okay, how we're going to manage Trump from now on. Consider that he seems to be totally unhinged. And obviously, most of the time inconsequential and unpredictable. That's very dangerous in realpolitik. And in the geopolitical juncture that we are now, where we know that the pressures against Trump, not only inside the US, the deep state, the silos in the CIA, in the industrial military complex, in the Pentagon, but also the Atlanticist elites, old money in Europe, the whole Brussels architecture. Everybody's against any sort of accommodation between Russia and US. So he has to come up with some sort of victory, Nima. And for the moment, there's nothing in the horizon. So one possibility is something that we're going to see in Vladivostok next week. Business. So I'm very, very curious about the business discussions in Vladivostok and what Americans will be in Vladivostok. Maybe if it's not an American delegation, if we have CEOs of high officials from some key American energy companies, this will be a telltale sign that something serious is going on. And it is. We already know, in Russia, we already know for a few days that Exxon and Rosneft were already talking about Exxon returning to the Sakhalin gas project, which they had to leave because of sanctions, and they lost over $4 billion, which they plan to recoup, obviously. And obviously, Exxon is picking up the phone and calling the White House and say, look, we want to go back to Russia and do business. This is a language that Trump understands, directly. And obviously, other American companies, okay, maybe we can start selling energy equipment to Russia again. And they need it with so many gas projects everywhere. So, and of course, from the Trumpian point of view, investment in Alaska, which is something that he already mentioned explicitly. So the business opportunities will be there being discussed in Vladivostok. And in Tianjin, during the SCO summit, they'll be discussing the geopolitical ramifications of trying to manage this narcissistic figure completely out of control.
It seems that the main goal is North Korea, is not the United States or any other party. He's somehow pushing for denuclearization, considering North Korea, but I'm not sure if North Korea would be positive, would be any open to talk about it. Here is what he said.
Absolutely no question, no way. This is never going to happen. Okay, please play it. Yes.
To do with Russia and with China is denuclearization. And it's very important. One of the things I discussed with President Putin the other day, it wasn't just that, it was also other things. And I think the denuclearization is it's a big aim, but Russia's willing to do it, and I think China's going to be willing to do it too. We can't let nuclear weapons proliferate. We have to stop nuclear weapons. The power is too great.
Why am I don't see it a positive sign? Because the same day he's talking about calling the Ministry of Defense the Ministry of War. Why
Yes.
how you can put these two pictures together? They contradict each other.
You can't put these two pictures together, Nima. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. It could be the INF treaty. It could be limits on mid-range, short and mid-range missiles, and limit on long-range missiles with nuclear warhead. Or he could be talking, and he doesn't even know he would be talking about it, a completely different nuclear paradigm, especially between the US and Russia. And the Chinese said, no, we're not going to discuss our nuclear arsenal with anybody. Not to mention Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un, his the major chips that he has on the table is DPRK's nuclear power. He will never relinquish that. Never. No way. Absolutely not. Especially because he knows that the possibility of a unification of the Koreas is less than zero and will continue to be less than zero. Because for the empire, South Korea is an asset. They won't let South Korea go. So let's say in the next century, if we could arrive at the possibility of a reunification of the Koreas, but still it's a long shot. So Trump makes it sound like what he heard from Putin would be the start of a new nuclear negotiation. No, it's not. Forget it. Not to mention that they simply cannot even touch the toxic subject of Israel's nuclear arsenal. You cannot talk about nuclear non-proliferation if Israel is allowed to have a non-declared nuclear arsenal. And in terms of Iran, everybody with an IQ over 50 knows that Iran does not want a nuclear weapon, as you know very well, Nima. They are being forced to probably get a nuclear weapon in the near future as a deterrent, because they will be attacked again by Israel and the US. Everybody also knows that. So the whole new discussion about nuclear weapons is a non-starter if we have all these taboos still lingering. And the Russians know that very well because they discuss this issue with both China and North Korea. As much as they discuss the known weaponized nuclear program of Iran with Iran all the time. The Russians know all about it and all the margin of maneuver and why the whole thing is stalling and what the Americans will try to get out of it, some sort of advantage. And especially with a president that he cannot start a process like that because the industrial military complex will be the first to say, no, we're not making any concessions to anybody, starting with the Russians, much less with the Chinese. What do they want, essentially, but they cannot say? They want everybody else to demilitarize in terms of nuclear weapons, but they keep their own arsenal. That's the imperial logic, always, no?
That doesn't make sense because
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
you're trying to send weapons to Ukraine, fighting this stupid proxy war for more than 3 years, and still sending weapons, intelligence, giving them everything.
Yeah.
But you feel that you can somehow talk about denuclearization. So
Exactly. Because the intrinsic logic of the empire, even now that it's dwindling, is forever wars. The problem is they don't have the capacity to launch forever wars anymore, especially because everything that they launched in the past few years, they lost all of them ignominiously in many cases. So once again, comes back to the 50% of the non-strategy they have that is actually working. They can make money exploiting the vassals. That's the only thing left. And especially now, after this mix of geoeconomic and tariff war against the leaders of the global south, now they managed to accomplish something that until a few months ago, many of us were saying it's impossible. They united all of the big powers in the global south, especially India, China. China, in terms of their geopolitical victories, it's unbelievable. Like they're raking like one if they go, it's like one a week, non-stop. I'll give another example. They finally got together on the same table, Afghanistan and Pakistan. We know there are lots of problems between the Taliban and Pakistan. Only the Chinese can do that. Why? Because the Chinese convinced the Taliban that now you're going to be part of, okay, we call it the Chinese, China-Pakistan economic corridor, but you are also going to be part of this economic corridor. It's going to be a China-Pakistan-Afghanistan economic corridor with all the benefits for you. We're going to build hydroelectric plants for you. We're going to build new highways. We are already building the highway crossing the Wakhan Desert. We will help you in all your development projects all over Afghanistan. So this also suits Pakistan because on a key geopolitical border, Pakistan can finally enjoy some stability. Pakistan and Afghanistan have always been very complicated neighbors, as we know. Chinese go there, talk to both sides. Okay, lots of deals here and there. Voila, you got a solution. It's fascinating. And of course, the Russians started this process, I would say, from day one of the Taliban coming back to power. I remember I was following this story on an everyday basis. And the Russian ambassador in Kabul, who understands the Pashtun mentality very, very well, from the beginning he was there, and the Taliban were talking to him, and he said, okay, I'll explain the game to all of you guys. And they trust the Russians. That's immensely important. I'm sure I'm going to see a Taliban delegation in Vladivostok next week. They were in St. Petersburg 2 months ago. So that's it. Russia and China working with Afghanistan. And sooner rather than later, Afghanistan is going to become a full member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They're going to be at the summit in Tianjin this weekend as partners. Soon, they're going to be full members as well. So this is how you do it, Nima. It's long-term diplomacy. It's a lot of work. You have to do the grassroots work. You have to be there. You have to send your best ambassadors and officials and all that. And then you see, springing up a new node in the chessboard. In this case, Afghanistan, Pakistan is immensely important because it also means closer integration with the Central Asian neighbors, with Tajikistan, with Uzbekistan, with Kyrgyzstan, and all that. And that, once again, the Chinese, they are building new railways. They want to integrate Afghanistan into the railway network in that part of Eurasia. Compare that with the non-strategy of the Americans, Dima. We cannot even start. There's no competition.
The SCO, Pepe, somehow is way ahead of BRICS when it comes to the security, especially when it comes to security.
Yeah.
How do you draw the difference between BRICS and SCO when it comes to the security? And, somehow it feels that SCO is the essence of BRICS, it feels that.
In a sense, it's a very good point, Nima, because they started a few months before 9. Can you imagine that the SCO, the original Shanghai Five, Russia, China, and 3 Central Asians, their first meeting was in June 2001, 3 months before 9/11. Can you believe this? Most people don't remember that. And at the time, it was a Chinese idea. That's why they were called Shanghai Five. We're going to fight against what the Chinese call the 3 evils. Let me see if I remember correctly. Terrorism, separatism. Well, they're all related to terrorism. And the way they evolved during the 2000s was relatively slow. And then in the 2010s, they started to evolve much faster and little by little changing the configuration. We are not only an anti-terror organization, security organization. We should become also an economic cooperation organization. So this started to happen 2013, 14, 15. I remember very well because I was going to some of their round tables, for instance, in St. Petersburg, and they were starting to discuss business, geoeconomics, and not only security. It was fascinating. You go to a round table like that. Many times I was the only Westerner or the only non-Eurasian. So there were Kyrgyz, Kazakhs, Chinese, Russians, etc. And they were starting to discuss business. These past few years, it's basically business. Most of the time, they discuss deals. They discuss economic investment, economic cooperation, connectivity corridors, and all that, especially after the Americans were expelled from Afghanistan. Then they started to pick up speed because they saw that, okay, our next step is to integrate Afghanistan inside the SCO, and then we can talk about pan-Eurasian security. Turkey is an observer at the SCO, but that's complicated, Nima, because then you're going to be allowing a sort of fifth column getting inside the organization. And nobody trusts Turkey, at least among the big players. Of course, nobody trusts Turkey, but Turkey tries to influence especially Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, because they have a Turkish economic presence in these 3 Central Asian nations. But in terms of being a sort of blueprint to how BRICS could consolidate a mutual security platform, BRICS can learn from the SCO. And especially the fact that many of the top BRICS are also SCO members. And that brings us once again to why Lukashenko say that in the end they will merge, these two multilateral organizations will merge, because it makes sense and they're working towards the same goal. The only difference is the SCO is pan-Eurasia, it's Eurasia-wide, and BRICS is transcontinental. Of course, much more ambitious. And of course, the preoccupation of BRICS is geoeconomics. The SCO is getting there. It started as security, but now it's geoeconomics. They will be discussing a lot of deals this weekend in Tianjin. There's no question about that, especially because all the top leaders will be there. It's much easier for them. Okay, let's, that highway that you're going to build, let that extend over there, so many possibilities. The connectivity corridors, the international north-south transportation corridor, three BRICS. And these three BRICS will be in Tianjin as SCO members this weekend as well. There you go. The Arctic Silk Road, which will benefit mostly Russia and China, but it could benefit the other ones as well. These new railways integrating Pakistan, Uzbekistan. There's one railway called Pakafuz, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan. It's taking a long time, okay, but it's being built at least. And for the Central Asians, it'll be a huge deal. So it shows us, and it shows the global South at large, that these multilateral organizations, they can be extremely effective. It takes time for them to consolidate and start expanding. But it's the same thing with BRICS. Once BRICS picks up speed, now BRICS is, everybody wants BRICS. And what happened? It happened during these past 2 years. The STO, I think they're reaching the same stage. Maybe the big, takeoff of the SCO will start this weekend.